Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for you today. So we've had two major announcements in the past couple of days, or actually since yesterday, to DC Universe Online. I wanted to cover those announcements. While they do sound like they're going to have huge impacts on the game, they really aren't. And I'm going to kind of talk about this here, but they do kind of lend some unique insight to what the kind of the game's future is going to be. So let's kind of cover this here. So the first part, we have the producer's letter, Penduris. So hello everybody. Today, Inad Global 7, so EG7 has entered into agreement to acquire Daybreak Game Company, and we're excited to confirm this includes Dimensional Ink Games and DC Universe Online. You just said we are excited to confirm this change. It'll have no impact on DCU's development team or operations. We still have the independence that we had to embrace. So it just means that they are acquired. So EG7 is basically, think of it as like a conglomerate. They have acquired Daybreak, and Daybreak still owned the mini studios that kind of broke off from Daybreak, which is Dimensional Ink and the other games that there's like a studio for EverQuest, there's a studio for like Lord of the Rings or something. So basically they just acquired all the assets of Daybreak, and Dimensional Ink were a part of those assets. So then he goes on to speaking plans and years. DC's 10th anniversary is January 11th, 2021. And we've got huge things. Until then, here at Dimensional Ink, we hope you're happy holidays. So kind of like a mini preview of the producers' list that we'll get in January. But I wanted to cover this into a little bit more in depth. So we're going to look at the EG7 investor presentation. Now, I'm going to try to explain this the easiest way I can think of. I'm sure some of you might kind of go over their head a little bit, but this does give a little bit of insight on DC, because this is basically what they gave their shareholders. So really think of like EG7 bought like, let's go back here. So if I do like EG7 and find their website here. So same thing. So think of it, let's see, go here, portfolio. So here we go. So 150 previous game projects, current game projects, ongoing marketing campaigns. They kind of give a brief preview of their games. So same thing. So development experience, Rising Storm 2, My Singing Monsters, Warhammer, Dead Island, Evolve, Battlestar Galactica, upcoming owned original IPs, publishing experience, Sniper Elite, Zombie 4, Planet Coaster, DayZ, marketing campaign experience, Call of Duty, Destiny, Fortnite. So think of it, it's just a big conglomerate company that manages IPs or assets. So they're just scooping up stuff as they can. It was a $300 million acquisition, so certainly nothing to slap your hand at. But all they're doing is basically acquiring all the assets, so like H1Z1, everything that was a part of Daybreak games. So let's kind of go back here. So we're going to jump down to the DC section here. So basically your Daybreak's key personnel and highlights. So it's just going over Jason Epstein, who is basically the Columbus Nova investor or whatever. Jack Hammer, who's the current CEO. Major hit, DC Universe Online launched in 2011. And then basically they're going to PlanetSide 2, H1Z1. So globally recognized party. So basically they're picking it up because of how successful and how recognizable these names are. So DC, Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, EverQuest. So now we're getting into the nitty gritty here. So bookings by game. This is essentially looking at how many the percentage of players that actually purchase the game out of the whole thing. So like basic members, if I'm reading that right. This one I'm more looking at the EBITDA. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I don't use it by the acronym. I use it by the full one. So the actual thing is the earnings before interest, earning before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So that's the long form of it. So basically we're looking at a ratio. So essentially the ratio is going to be basically the earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation over net sales. So basically this is all think of it like a profit margin of DC Universe Online. So the ratio for that is 20%. So obviously the higher the ratio, the better. That's why you can see DC Universe is doing well. Same thing with EverQuest, and then EverQuest 2, Dungeons and Dragons PlanetSide 2. These ones are a bit lacking. But as you can see here, you want DC Universe Online to have a higher ratio. It's more so DC Universe Online is as a financially successful game. So that's why you don't really have to think a lot of stuff's going to change, because they're not going to want to change something that's already working fine. So it's more, think of this ratio as basically how much cash a company generates for each dollar of sales revenue before accounting for everything else, before accounting for like the bottom line. So that's why it's up there. I don't know much too about EverQuest, but I know that's since it's been out so long, I'm sure it's like that. But I can't speak to what EverQuest does to their microtransactions and stuff like that. So looking at it here, loyal user base, industry-leading monetization. So it's basically a loyalty base. I'm not sure if this is actually up to DC Universal Online, average session up to 5 hours. I'm not sure if that's a total of all the games or just DC Universal Online. I'm pretty sure it's a total. So all of these 6 games combined, that's what their sessions are, the retention rate, the active users. So going back to here, which is going to be the ARPPU. So what's that? That is the average revenue per paying user. So that means that since I'm a member of, or I have a membership to DC Universal Online, I am a part of a paying user. So that means the monthly revenue per paying user for DC is $47.50. So that's the average monthly. So each paying user, so each person that pays a membership, I'm assuming that figure is for memberships and not for people that buy like one marketplace item or something like that, or spend like $5 on resets or something like that. I'm assuming that's going to be memberships. I could be wrong because obviously it isn't a huge breakdown, but I'm assuming that's $47.50 is an average monthly revenue per membership or per paying user, because I'm sure that's how they would classify a paying user as a membership. And then we've got the monthly player conversion. So this is the smaller reason. So the reason why this number seems kind of high, like $50 a month per member, that's kind of a lot considering your membership's like $10-15. So that means they incorporate you spending this much on seals and replays and time capsules and all that. So that seems pretty high. But this 13%, why this is so low is the player conversion. What this ratio is that how many total players are on DC, because DC is still a free-to-play game. So what this 13% ratio is looking at is the total users of DC, how many of those are actually a paying user. So that's why this ratio, well, PlanetSide 2 you saw wasn't doing too well anyway, so I'm sure that's just kind of not as a popular game in their portfolio. But the reason why DC is so low is that there are a lot of free-to-play users in DC. Like it is a high game in terms of volume of player base, but not much of that is spending money. So it just means that the reason why this is so high is that we have a bunch of whales on the top end that are basically increasing the average. At least that would be my assumption. It's because that we have a giant player base in DC, but so many are free to play and so many don't spend any money compared to like say EverQuest 2 and EverQuest, which are in the 40%. So that's how I interpret that ratio at least. And then we're looking here, booking per user. So it's basically, obviously, since DC's been around for 10 years, this is why the 3+ years, and like Dungeons & Dragons and EverQuest and DC, it's pretty much, so this is just saying the how many users sign up for 70% or 3+ years, which makes sense. So the reason why you'd kind of want a higher ratio here on the top end is that to less than a month. So this is 7.3%, which is pretty much in line with everything else, is a user of less than a month. And we look at the robust growth opportunities. So they're already looking ahead to DC. So summary, so modernize visuals, upgrade key game systems, and add brand new large content update to capitalize on the next-gen console's growth cycle for a significant growth opportunity. So they already know this is the first thing in Q4 2021. So they already have this plan to be able to add some new tech and to increase DCOs and upgrade DC. So they already know since it's a financial game, let's focus on this first, and everything else is kind of afterwards. Like that's why I Lord of the Rings and everything else. So they're focusing on DCC first because they know that in terms of all the ratios, in terms of profitability, DC has that there. So, and then basically this is just everything else. It doesn't really focus much on DC. So really that's where I wanted to kind of highlight that there, because we don't really get this kind of information before. Like SOE didn't give any kind of information out. We didn't have any kind of financial statements on DC. It was basically under lock and key. We knew a little bit when they released it because technically Sony was a publicly traded company. And then Daybreak, we didn't know anything about financial statements. So at least this kind of gave a nice little looking in through the looking glass, being able to see some numbers here. While they don't give like a concrete response, it is certainly nice to see these kind of metrics, and it kind of gives us an idea there. So that's basically what I have to do there. So Daybreak Games is being acquired by EG7. Not really much is going to change how we know it. It just means that DC, they see the potential in DC, so it's not like it's going to go anywhere anytime soon, and they're not going to don't. Was it one of those things where if it's not broken, don't fix it? I'm sure there's some kind of saying there. I forget exactly what it is, but I mean they're not going to mess around with DC. If anything, they're going to put more resources at DC so that some of those ratios go up. Because they see the active user base, if they can increase that 13% ratio to up to like the 20s and 40s, like the other, EverQuest, then they know the profitability is going to be much higher. So the other announcement was here. So SJ, or Nerd of Prey, announced that congrats to my friends at Daybreak Games on a bright future. And speaking of bright futures, I've got one of my own. Now seems to be a good time to mention I've left the company several weeks ago, which would put her leaving before the DLC release for Long Live the Legion, to start a brand new adventure abroad in 2021. DC players and fans, I thank you for an incredible, unforgettable journey, an amazing part of my life that would not have been possible without you, and you were following me for the latest DC news. No hard feelings. Please make sure to follow at DC Universe Online. Rest assured, the future of DCU is in great hands. So, essentially, with Nerd of Prey she was the creative director. So, basically, she had the creative vision for DC and where they would kind of take the game. Similar to what Jens Anderson was before, or Spittle. That's probably what most of you know him before. And I think before that it was Chris Kao. When I first started playing, I know a little bit about him, but I wasn't really like hardcore into DC Universe Online back then, so I don't know much. I know Chris Kao, his vision was basically push as much content as possible, even if it had bugs or not. That's why like nowadays we're used to getting game updates and like hot fixes, like game updates would be like a bug fix. Well, back then game updates were like entire raids. We had FOSS 1, FOSS 2, and FOSS 3 a part of game updates, which obviously would never happen now. It'd be an entire DLC episode, but no, it was a game update. It's like it was a raid before. So, I'm not entirely sure how I want to phrase this. Let's kind of see, because I mean I'm not trying to like tarnish her legacy or whatever she left with DC. Cause I mean she was around for a while. She was around here with Spittle or Jens Anderson. Just that Jens Anderson was a creative director and she was doing something else, and then she took over for him when he left. So I'll say it like this: one, if you're a creative director for a game, especially like an MMO, my thought process would be that you would have some kind of vested interest in the game itself. So Nerd of Prey, it seemed like she was more involved in the flash of DC Universe Online, not the actual substance, where Jen Anderson cared more about the substance. He just had Jen Anderson, he would do those weekly live streams where he would PvP. He would do like the Friday Night Legends with Meps. He would do he raided all the time. Like he actively played on the server. Like when's the last time you see a dev actively like raiding like every day? He would start up a stream. I mean, before Arc Falling Out, he raided with Fami in Nexus. He would tank our raids. He would do PvP with us. That's why we learned that his PvP preference was like wasn't team deathmatch. It was basically like the hold nodes and stuff like that. Like he didn't care for the TDM aspect of PvP. But he had a vision for the game. It was just the wrong vision. He brought in like the movement mode debuffs, which no one asked for. He took away the rock, paper, scissors, which no one asked for. He brought in the weapon mastery changes, which no one asked for. So it's like, while I think Jens Anderson did more harm to the game than anything else in the history of the game, I can't fault him for having that vision. He just, while you listen to players, he just kind of got it in his own head that this is the direction he wanted to take it, and I mean he ran with it. So I can't fault him for that. Well, I can fault him for that as a player, but I can't fault that for him as a creative director. He also brought replays in, so I mean he made a lot of huge changes to the game. Where Nerd of Prey, you don't really see that. If someone said what is Nerd of Prey's legacy with DC Universe Online, I couldn't tell you what that is. Maybe like some storylines, maybe some like new time capsules and new style updates. I mean, that would be her legacy per se. I'm not sure. Honestly, if there's people that like followed her and stuff like that, please tell me in the comment section of this video what her legacy was. So, I mean, it's really easy to define like Tunzo's legacy It's really easy to define like Jens Anderson's legacy. It's really easy to define like Batuba's legacy, even Stoll. It's really easy to define Mepps' legacy. So it's these, Mepps, I wouldn't consider him a developer, but he's still obviously a huge part of DC Universe Online. But it's really easy to define those types of individuals as their legacies, like what their mark was on DC Universe Online. And I can't say that for Nerd of Prey. I don't know what her legacy was. I don't know what her mark was on the game. I know she certainly didn't play the game. I know there's a whole bunch of evidence of that when you saw her play like on a live stream or what kind of loadout she ran. It's just, you could tell she like hadn't played the game ever. And that's my concern. That's, if I'm going to have a creative director, I want them to be able to play the game so they know what vision it should take. Like, I'm all for storylines and stuff like that, and following comic books and stuff like that. Like, I know that's a huge part of DC because that's the DC IP, basically. They've got access to all these different characters and all these different storylines and comic book variations. I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but if you have a great story but, like, you know, crappy substance or crappy mechanics or crappy raids and crappy content, I mean, does it matter? I mean, who's going to play DC and spend all this money and play every single day for like a good story where after a cutscene, you're not watching it again? I mean, you know the story. So I don't know what it is. So that's the announcement. There's a lot more going on with the EG7 acquisition, but I did want to cover the Nerd of Prey announcement. But like I said before, if you're a fan of Nerd of Prey, tell me her legacy. What is her mark on the game? Put it in that comment section, because honestly, I would like to know. I didn't follow her as much as I did Jens Anderson, because Jens Anderson and I had more of like player versus developer. I mean, that's pretty much what our relationship was. Kind of infamous, that's for sure. But at the end, he was still doing his job. I mean, it was just that he wasn't doing his job to what the players wanted. But Nerd of Prey, I can't, besides seeing her have some live streams and stuff like that, I can't say the same thing. So who knows who our next creative director is going to be, or if they even have a creative director, or if they're going to keep that position. So who knows? But certainly the one that I would want to be as a resume would be being able to know what the community actually wants and what the game actually needs going forward. So take care, guys. We'll see you in the next video.